So we're still on part 2, which is playing with fire. And this is chapter 6, the healthy choice. Okay. Whenever a vegan falls ill, non-vegans always blame it on their diet. Have a cold? It's because you're vegan. Stomach bug? It's because you're vegan. Are you looking tired today? It's because you're vegan. Someone even once told me that several work colleagues in their office had come down with the flu, but that when they also got it, they were told by co-workers that it must have been because they were vegan. When I first went vegan, I too was warned about the danger of not getting enough nutrients. Another student on the same university course as me even stated that there wouldn't be any vegan options available at the event we were organizing together because if people don't eat meat, they'll all be fainting. Needless to say, there is a lot of scrutiny around the healthfulness of plant-based products, or plant-based diets. My own personal experience is of having more energy, better skin, better digestion, and an increased feeling of well-being since going vegan. But what does the science say? In 2009, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics in the USA, formerly called the American Dietetic Association, the largest body of diet and nutrition professionals in the country, released a statement regarding the healthfulness of plant-based diets. It is the position of the American Dietetic Association that appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including total vegetarian or vegan diets, are healthful, nutritionally adequate, and may provide health benefits in the prevention and treatment of certain diseases. Well-planned vegetarian diets are appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, and adolescence, and for athletes. The British Dietetic Association concurs, stating, well-planned plant-based diets can support healthy living at every age and life stage. This position is also supported by the NHS. With good planning and an understanding of what makes up a healthy, balanced vegan diet, you can get all the nutrients your body needs. And the same position is taken by Harvard Medical School, the Mayo Clinic, Dietitians of Canada, and many more. Outside of the confirmation that eating a plant-based diet can be healthy and even beneficial in the prevention of certain diseases, it's important to note that these statements emphasize the importance of a plant-based diet being well-planned and balanced. The truth is, you can be a healthy vegan or an unhealthy vegan. The latter is especially true thanks to the ever-growing range of vegan burgers, chicken pieces, and ice creams. However, while it's good to highlight the importance of a healthy plant-based diet, it creates the impression that if you eat animal products, you don't need to think about what you consume or know anything about what makes up a balanced diet, which is not true. For instance, it is estimated that only 5% of US citizens are consuming the recommended amount of fiber a day, even though eating fiber-rich foods is associated with better gut health, lower cholesterol, and reduced risk of strokes, heart attacks, type 2 diabetes, and some forms of cancer. In the UK, fewer than 10% are consuming enough. Around half of the US population is estimated to consume less than the recommended amount of magnesium from food, with research showing that as many as 30% of people in affluent countries may have subclinical magnesium deficiency. And the list goes on. The point is, regardless of whether you are eating a plant-based diet or not, it is important to know where you're getting your nutrients from, and to take ownership of your health, as anyone eating any diet can miss out on the things their body needs to be healthy. Personally, I have found the added scrutiny on the healthfulness of a plant-based diet to be beneficial, as it has encouraged me to do proper research, take charge, and make sure that I am obtaining the necessary nutrients. Before I was vegan, I had no idea what vitamin B12 was, or non-heme iron. In fact, I knew almost nothing about what foods gave me which nutrients and what I needed to be healthy. The extent of my knowledge was that vitamin C comes from oranges, calcium comes from cow's milk, protein comes from meat, and omega-3 comes from fish. Beyond that, I never considered that I could be deficient or lacking nutrients in my diet. I was told that eating meat, dairy, and eggs was all part of a balanced diet. So why would I need to worry? This is a huge part of the problem. We are taught almost nothing about nutrition, and a huge amount of our perception about food is subsequently created by advertising and marketing, carried out by companies who are trying to sell us something. It's no wonder we believe that cow's milk is the best source of calcium, when for millions of people, the Got Milk campaign in the USA was a part of popular culture, with celebrities being featured with milk mustaches, telling us milk is an important part of a healthy diet. It was so influential that it is well recognized around the world. Milk mustaches were then used to promote dairy in the UK as well, with the Make Mine Milk promotional campaign. That animal products constitute part of a balanced diet is an idea consistently perpetuated by the animal farming industries. An advert promoting red meat and dairy consumption that was screened on UK televisions in early 2021 with the tagline "Eat Balanced" is a good case in point. However, this creates a false notion that if you don't eat red meat and dairy, you must not be eating a balanced diet and are unhealthy. It's a wonderful stroke of good fortune that a balanced diet just so happens to involve eating the animal products that the farmers who promote that idea want to sell you. According to this narrative, a balanced diet doesn't involve eating the flesh and secretions of other animals that are eaten around the world, such as camels, dogs, cats, whales, dolphins, horses, guinea pigs, crocodiles, kangaroos, shark fins, turtles, iguanas, monkeys, emus, and so on. Luckily for us, out of the literally thousands of edible animals that we consume, it's the 4 or 5 animals that have been farmed where we live for hundreds of years, long before we even knew about nutrients, that are the ones important for a balanced diet. Thankfully, there are more scientifically robust recommendations of what really constitutes a balanced diet available. The Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet is the first full scientific review of what would constitute a healthy diet within a sustainable food system. It was created by an international commission made up of leading scientists from 16 countries and published in The Lancet, one of the most respected medical journals in the world. It recommended that people in Western countries eat between 77 and 84% less red meat, categorized eggs, poultry, and dairy as optional, and confirmed that a plant-based diet is a healthy option. In response, a member of the Meat Advisory Panel said that encouraging people to eat less red meat and dairy will have little impact on the environment and is potentially damaging to people's health. It is frightening that such a detailed report, one that has been referred to as the most advanced ever conducted, can be so readily disregarded by those within the animal farming industries, especially considering they have nothing even remotely comparable in terms of scientific validity or scale to support their response. Geographical life expectancy rates don't support the position taken by the Meat Advisory Panel either. There are 5 areas of the world that are referred to as the blue zones. In these places, people live exceptionally long lives, and there are comparatively very high numbers of centenarians. One of the things most notable about those living in blue zones is that they eat a diet that is 95% plant-based. How to thrive on a plant-based diet. So, while we know that you can be healthy on a vegan diet, there are some nutrients to be especially aware of to ensure we get them from plant-based sources. The first thing to note is that a healthy plant-based diet should be a whole foods one, which means a diet centered around minimally processed plants such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, pulses, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Although processed vegan alternatives like meat-free burgers don't contain many of the harmful aspects of animal products and have been associated with having lower cardiovascular risk factors when compared to red meat burgers, as well as increasing the health of the gut microbiome when compared to animal products, they are not the healthiest foods. So, though you can absolutely enjoy the variety of plant-based alternatives that are now available, a diet made up mainly of whole foods is the best way to be healthy and thrive on a plant-based diet. Protein. The question of where to source protein from will, I have no doubt, bring a smile to the face of most vegans, because even though protein is not something vegans need to especially be concerned about, we are constantly asked if we get enough of it. Protein is made up of amino acids, 9 of which are considered essential, meaning they must be acquired through diet. All of the essential amino acids our bodies need can be found in plants, with some plants such as soy, which includes foods such as tofu, tempeh, soy milk, and edamame, quinoa and buckwheat being complete sources of protein, meaning they contain all the essential amino acids. However, you can get all the essential amino acids through food combinations as well, such as rice and beans, hummus and pita bread, or a whole wheat peanut butter sandwich. You don't need to consume all the essential amino acids at the same time, as long as you eat a variety of good plant-based protein sources throughout the day. It is generally recommended that most adults eat about 0.75 to 0.8 grams of protein per day per kilogram of body weight, which on average means about 46 grams for a woman and 56 grams for a man. If you work out, are pregnant, or do challenging physical work, you'll need to consume a bit more. Obtaining protein on a vegan diet is very easy, and as long as you're eating the recommended number of calories for your lifestyle and body, and in making sure to incorporate some protein-rich plant foods, then you'll be fine. Healthy sources of plant-based protein include legumes such as beans, soy, lentils, and chickpeas, whole grains such as oats, farro, brown rice, and whole wheat pasta, nuts and seeds, vegetables such as broccoli, green peas, Brussels sprouts, and asparagus, and seitan. Swapping from animal protein to plant protein has also been associated with a lower risk of premature death. In 2020, a study was published for which researchers had followed 400,000 participants aged 50 or older who consumed protein from either plant sources, red meat, or eggs for 16 years. The data revealed that those who ate predominantly plant protein had a 13 to 15% lower overall risk of mortality when compared to those consuming red meat, and a 24% lower risk when compared to those eating eggs, even when factors such as smoking, diabetes, vitamin supplementation, and more were factored in. In a review of 32 studies about protein intake that included more than 715,000 participants who were followed for periods ranging from 3.5 years all the way to more than 30 years, plant protein consumption was associated with an 8% lower risk of all-cause mortality, and in the case of mortality from heart disease, there was a 12% lower risk. The authors of the review concluded, these findings have important public health implications, as intake of plant protein can be increased relatively easily by replacing animal protein, and could have a large effect on longevity. Although it is often believed that a plant-based diet will inhibit muscle growth. One study found that when comparing protein intake from animals or plants for muscle mass and strength, there was no difference. Oh, no significant difference. In fact, studies that examined the bones of Roman gladiators showed that they primarily ate plants, especially wheat and barley, with there being little sign of meat or dairy products in their diets. This fits with the name barley men, which was a contemporary term used to describe gladiators. There are vegan bodybuilders and strongmen, such as the Olympic weightlifter Kendrick Farris and Patrick Barboumian, a strength athlete who holds the world record for heaviest yoke, a bar or frame that goes behind the head and across the shoulders, carried over 10 meters. There are also many high-profile vegan athletes, such as Dotsie Bosch, who is an 8-time US national cycling champion, a 2-time Pan American gold medalist, and an Olympic silver medalist. NBA basketball stars such as Chris Paul and Kyrie Irving say that a plant-based diet increased their energy and performance levels, and there are vegan world record-holding ultra-marathon runners, footballers and NFL players. Tennis stars Novak Djokovic and Venus Williams have both promoted the benefits of a plant-based diet, as has the Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. In other words, not only is getting enough protein from a plant-based diet not a problem for the everyday person, it isn't a problem for elite athletes either. They have been shown to thrive on plant-based diets, and even increase their performance levels and become more successful. Iron. Iron is an essential mineral that, among other things, helps maintain healthy blood. In particular, the body uses iron to create hemoglobin and myoglobin, which carry oxygen. In days gone by, doctors would recommend that their patients drink Guinness after surgery or giving blood. Although I am all for a nice plant-based alcoholic beverage from time to time, I wouldn't recommend stout as a good source of iron, as it only contains about 0.3 milligrams per pint. There are two main forms of dietary iron, heme and non-heme. Heme iron is only found in animal products, while non-heme iron mainly comes from plant foods. Heme iron is more easily absorbed, but the body is unable to regulate its take-up, meaning that it can't remove excess amounts. This can be problematic, as iron is a pro-oxidant. Too much of it can lead to inflammation. Heme iron consumption has also been associated with an increased risk of colon cancer, with one analysis associating heme iron intake with an 18% increase in colon cancer risk. Clinical trials have also shown that heme iron can increase the formation of compounds that can damage the cells of the bowel lining, increasing the risk of cancer. And in another analysis, higher dietary heme iron intake was associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, while there was no association found with non-heme iron intake. Although less easily absorbed, non-heme iron from plant foods is better regulated by the body and is often full of antioxidants. And combining it with vitamin C can mean it is absorbed more effectively, which can be achieved simply by squeezing some lemon over your food. Many fruits, particularly citrus fruits and berries, contain abundant vitamin C, and it's also found in vegetables, where it is often coupled with a good source of iron to begin with, as is the case for vegetables like broccoli and kale. It is recommended that men over the age of 19 and women over the age of 50 should get 8.7 milligrams of iron a day, and women aged 19 to 50 should get 14.8 milligrams. Healthy sources of plant-based iron include seeds, such as pumpkin, chia, flax, and hemp; soy, including tofu and tempeh; whole grains, such as quinoa, oats, and whole grain bread. Nuts, such as cashews and almonds. Legumes, such as beans, chickpeas, and lentils. Leafy green vegetables. Dried herbs, such as thyme and parsley. Dried fruits, such as apricots, dates, and prunes. Alright, 1 second, I'm gonna have a drink. Alright. Calcium. I consider myself lucky to have avoided the free milk in schools era. I always disliked the taste of cow's milk and found it deeply unpleasant to consume. I can distinctly remember my dad giving me a glass of milk to drink when I was young. It was a gesture that came from a caring place, but the fact that I can so vividly recall the experience probably indicates how I felt about it. I also remember being repulsed by the smell of porridge being made because of how the milk smelled when it was being cooked. Realizing that oats are delicious when made with a plant milk has been a real revelation for me. As mentioned in an earlier chapter, free milk was given to school kids and has for a long time been thought of as an essential part of a healthy diet. But this perception, which still persists today, is hugely due to the prolific marketing of the dairy industry, which has made calcium synonymous with dairy products. But while they do provide calcium, they are by no means the only or healthiest source. For example, dairy consumption has been associated with prostate cancer, as was shown in an analysis of 47 studies incorporating more than 1 million participants, looking at the effects of animal and plant foods on prostate cancer risk. The study found that men who ate the highest amount of dairy products had a 65% higher risk of developing prostate cancer than those consuming the lowest amounts, whereas those who ate plant-based diets had a 36% lower risk. A correlation between an increased risk of prostate cancer and dairy consumption has also been found when comparing the incidence and mortality rates of prostate cancer in 42 countries, alongside the dietary practices of the countries. A review of 3 studies suggested that substituting 1 serving of dairy per day for nuts and legumes was associated with a 14% lower risk of total mortality. Healthy plant-based sources of calcium include fortified plant milks, vegetables such as kale, broccoli, bok choy, and cabbage, legumes such as beans and lentils, nuts such as almonds, hazelnuts, walnuts, pistachios, and Brazil nuts, seeds such as chia and sesame, including tahini, whole grains such as oats, dried fruits such as figs, raisins, dried apricots, and prunes. When it comes to calcium, certain foods such as spinach, beet greens, and Swiss chard reduce the amount of calcium that can be absorbed by the body because they are high in oxalates. Cooking does, however, reduce the levels of these oxalates in the food, so it's not necessary to completely avoid these plants, especially as they are great sources of other nutrients, such as vitamin K and magnesium. They should just not be eaten too often and should preferably be cooked. Kale and broccoli, as well as being good sources of calcium, they actually have higher calcium absorption rate than cow's milk, are also low in oxalates. I like to add kale to a daily smoothie as it's an easy way of regularly getting calcium into my diet. Vitamin D. Vitamin D helps the body to metabolize calcium, meaning that even if you are consuming the right amount of calcium, you won't absorb it properly if you are vitamin D deficient. Vitamin D is often called the sunshine vitamin because sunlight is our main source. However, in many climates, we are unable to rely on the sun to provide us with the vitamin D we need to be healthy during the winter months. That being said, I'm writing this on an overcast summer's day in the UK, where it's more likely that I'll receive a vegan hamper from the NFU than my recommended amount of vitamin D from the sun. This is why it is recommended that everyone who lives in areas where there is limited access to sunlight should take a vitamin D3 supplement to make sure they are still getting the requisite amount, regardless of whether they eat a plant-based diet or not. You can also get vitamin D from plant-based foods, such as mushrooms that have been grown with UV light, as well as from fortified plant milks. Omega-3. Much in the same way that calcium has become synonymous with cow's milk, omega-3 fatty acids have become exclusively linked with fish consumption, especially oily fish. Fat is an essential part of our diet that helps us to absorb vital nutrients, produces important hormones, provides energy, and supports cell growth, among other things. However, there are different types of fat. Trans fat is a very harmful fat that can be found in heavily processed foods, such as fast food. Saturated fat is another harmful type of fat and is most commonly associated with meat, dairy, and eggs, but can also be found in high amounts in some plant-derived oils, like coconut and palm. Consuming too much saturated fat has been linked to high cholesterol levels and an increased risk of heart disease. However, unsaturated fats are an essential part of a healthy diet. Polyunsaturated fatty acids include an omega-3, ALA, and an omega-6 fatty acid, LA, that are not made by the body, so must be consumed through diet. The good news is that they are found in an abundance of plant foods. Incorporating a tablespoon or two of ground flaxseed into your diet each day is a great way of getting the ALA your body needs, and you can easily do this by adding it to a smoothie, along with the serving of kale I mentioned earlier. Personally, I like to get my daily amount of ground flaxseed by adding it to my morning oats. However, it's true that the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DHA that are also important for the body are virtually non-existent in plant foods. This is one reason why it's believed that it's necessary to eat fish or take supplements derived from fish. However, fish do not produce long-chain omega-3 fats themselves. The source of these fats in our diet is algae eaten by the fish. So this essentially means that we are filtering the nutrients through an animal unnecessarily, when we could just consume it from the source instead by taking an algae oil supplement. Our bodies can convert ALA into both EPA and DHA, but the rates of conversion can vary. So an algae oil supplement is the best way of ensuring that you are consuming the recommended amount each day. By getting long-chain omega-3 fats from algae oil supplements, we are avoiding the saturated fat that is found in fish, not to mention the toxins and pollutants that they often contain, including mercury and microplastics. Ironically, the fish farming industries often give algae oil to the fish to boost their long-chain omega-3 fats, meaning we create the supplement and then give it to the fish in aquatic factory farms that produce waste, pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions, and that also cause huge amounts of suffering and disease that we then have to treat with antibiotics. Also, we can then kill them and claim fish is a good source of omega-3 fats. It's cheaper, healthier, more sustainable, more ethical, and reduces antibiotic resistance to just eat the supplement ourselves in the first place. Fish oil is already one of the most popular supplements, so for millions of people, it's simply a case of changing the supplement to a different one. The best sources of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids are ground flaxseed and flaxseed oil, chia seeds, hemp seeds, and walnuts. B12. Vitamin B12 is often described as the Achilles heel of veganism, but that really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It is made by microbes that are found in soil, and are present in the digestive tracts of animals, including humans. However, our body is unable to absorb the B12 that is produced by the microbes in our colon, meaning that we have to get the vitamin from our diet. B12 can be found in animal products when the animals have consumed food, feces, soil, or water that contains B12, or through ruminant animals who produce B12 in their digestive system when they consume the mineral cobalt. Because our plant foods are sanitized and washed, there's no B12 left on plant foods, whereas in years gone by, we would have consumed B12 from contaminated water and plant foods, as well as from eating animals. Studies have shown that up to 40% of people in Western countries have low or marginal B12 status, meaning that inadequate B12 intake is far from only being a vegan problem. Moreover, similar to how farmed fish are supplemented with algae oil for long-chain omega-3 fats, factory farmed animals are given fortified feed and supplemented with B12, because they're not getting B12 in the natural way either. Even grass-fed animals are often supplemented with B12 or cobalt, which is necessary for ruminant animals to produce B12 in their digestive system, because lots of soil is now cobalt deficient. In essence, the majority of B12 in our diet is coming from a supplement one way or another. So we are faced with the choice of contributing to animal suffering, environmental degradation, and increased risk of infectious disease and antibiotic resistance to get B12. Or we can take a supplement, which is more often than not the way the animals we consume get B12 in the first place. You can also get B12 from fortified plant foods, such as cereals, plant milks, and nutritional yeast, but it's still advisable to supplement B12 anyway. Supplements. If I had £1 for every time someone told me that veganism is unhealthy because vegans take supplements, I would have enough to buy a lifetime supply of B12. However, the truth is that society has relied on supplementation and fortification for decades, and it's so normalized and widespread that we don't even recognize it. For example, outside of farmed fish being supplemented with long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, and farmed terrestrial animals being supplemented with B12 or cobalt, the following supplements are widespread in our food chain. Cow's milk is often fortified with vitamin D, iodine, and vitamin A. Soils are often fortified with selenium and cobalt. Cereal grain products, such as bread and cereals, are often fortified with nutrients such as folic acid, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, pantothenic acid, iron, calcium, and vitamin D. Salt is often iodized, meaning it is mixed with iodine. Flour is often fortified with iron. Egg-laying hens are often given vitamin D and omega-3 supplements. Animals are also often supplemented with selenium, zinc, iodine, vitamin E, phosphorus, copper. And the list goes on. And this doesn't even take into account the 76% of US adults and 48% of UK adults who take a supplement on a regular basis. If it's unhealthy that vegans get some nutrients from a supplement or through fortified foods, then it must be unhealthy that non-vegans do as well. So, by that logic, there should be no fortified foods for humans or fortified feeds and supplements for the animals we farm. While supplements shouldn't be taken as an excuse to not eat a healthy diet, complementing a diet that centers on whole plant foods with a supplement is a great way of making sure you aren't missing out on anything your body needs. Plus, it also means that you are then able to take full advantage of the benefits of a whole foods plant-based diet, and the reductions in chronic disease it can bring. I would recommend taking a supplement that is designed for vegans, meaning that it isn't just a general multivitamin that contains everything, which is unnecessary and can mean you're consuming more than the recommended daily dose of some nutrients. Most supplements for vegans will contain vitamin B12, vitamin D3, zinc, selenium, iron, vitamin K2, and iodine. Some will also contain long-chain omega-3 fats. But if not, I would include an algae oil supplement as well. It can also be useful to use a food tracking app when you first go vegan, as that way you can monitor your calories and nutrients and make sure that you are meeting all of your recommended daily amounts. On top of this, I would also recommend choose unsweetened and fortified plant milks. Soy and oat are my favorite for their taste, nutritional profile, and sustainability. Take 1 or 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed a day. Avoid refined grains and opt for whole grains, including whole wheat pasta, brown rice, and brown bread. Eat a Brazil nut a day, daily, for selenium. Eat the rainbow, meaning eat a variety of different colored fruits and vegetables, especially berries, dark leafy greens, and cruciferous vegetables such as cauliflower and kale. Limit processed foods and salt. Drink plenty of water, about 8 glasses a day. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Eating a healthy plant-based diet also has the advantage of helping to prevent some of our most common chronic diseases, something that's predicted to become increasingly important in the near future. In the USA, 60% of adults have a chronic disease, and 40% have 2 or more. In the UK, it is predicted that by 2035, 67% of over 65s will be living with 2 or more chronic diseases. Consequently, understanding how our lifestyles impact our risks of developing chronic diseases and preventing them is becoming increasingly important. This is where the benefits of a whole foods plant-based diet become particularly significant, as it's not only healthy from a nutritional perspective, it can even reduce the risk of many of our leading diseases and illnesses. Although the prevalence of many diseases is increasing, whole food plant-based diets have been shown to be low-risk interventions that are not only more cost-effective than medications, but also don't come with the side effects and negative consequences of pharmaceutical treatments. So, how exactly does swapping from animal-based foods to plants help? Heart disease. Unfortunately, most of us will know someone who has had a heart attack or suffers from heart disease. It's an illness that we have become so used to that we almost passively accept it as an inevitable part of life. In fact, ischemic heart disease is the #1 killer globally, causing the deaths of about 9 million people in 2019. The condition arises when plaque, which is a buildup of fatty deposits, accumulates inside the coronary arteries, restricting the flow of blood to the heart and therefore oxygen around the body. The disease develops over a long period of time, with a progressive restriction of blood flow occurring. Angina, which is the sensation of pain and pressure around the heart, is a symptom of heart disease, as is breathlessness due to the decreased blood flow. I hope you guys can't hear that crow. A heart attack can then arise when the plaque inside the artery ruptures, leading to a clot forming that can cause a blockage and cut off blood supply. In the USA, someone has a heart attack every 40 seconds. There are a range of risk factors associated with heart disease, including smoking and lack of exercise. However, according to one major analysis of 195 countries, diet is the largest risk factor when it comes to heart disease, with the findings showing that approximately 70% of ischemic heart disease deaths across the world could be prevented by people adopting healthier diets, more focused on fruits, vegetables, nuts, and whole grains. Although we require some cholesterol to be healthy, our body produces all we need. When we consume diets high in saturated fat, cholesterol levels become raised beyond what is healthy, which in turn contributes to the hardening of arteries and the increased likelihood of a blood clot forming. A whole foods plant-based diet does not contain any dietary cholesterol. A major study comparing the effects of plant-based diets and omnivorous diets on cholesterol levels found that plant-based diets are associated with decreased total cholesterol. Importantly, it is also very low in saturated fat. Processed foods, whether vegan or containing animal products, can be high in trans fat, saturated fat, and salt. So it is also important to avoid them whenever possible to reduce the risk of heart disease. As we've seen, whole plant foods are also high in fiber. In the case of heart disease, soluble fiber slows the absorption of cholesterol and reduces the amount produced by the liver. It can also reduce blood pressure and inflammation, two other important risk factors when it comes to heart disease. Amazingly, a plant-based diet doesn't just help prevent heart disease, but can even be of benefit to those who already have it. A plant-based intervention heart trial that was conducted in 2014 involved 198 people who had heart disease being put on a whole foods plant-based diet. Of the 177 people who stuck with the diet, one of them had a stroke. However, 21 of the 21 people who didn't stick with the diet, 13 of them suffered a cardiac event, meaning they either had a stroke, a heart attack, or a bypass operation. Stroke. Almost 90% of strokes are ischemic, meaning that they stem from blockages in the blood vessels leading to clots that deprive the brain of oxygen, which can cause leg and arm weakness, loss of speech, paralysis, and death. While there has been less investigation into the role of plant-based diets and stroke risk, a whole foods plant-based diet has been associated with a decreased likelihood, with one analysis finding that those who ate plant-based diets were associated with a 10% lower risk of suffering a stroke. In 2019, a report was released that looked at 48,000 participants and determined that vegetarians, in fact a group that contained both vegans and vegetarians, had a 13% lower rate of ischemic heart disease, but a 20% higher risk of stroke, mainly because of higher rates of hemorrhagic strokes, which are caused when blood vessels burst. This generated a huge amount of media attention. However, on closer evaluation, only 11% of the vegetarian group were vegan, with the vegetarians in this grouping consuming 29% more cheese than meat eaters. Cheese is commonly high in saturated fat and salt, which are both major risk factors for high blood pressure and strokes. They were also consuming below the recommended daily amount of fiber, which is important in the prevention of vascular disease. The meat eaters were also more likely to be taking medications to lower their cholesterol and blood pressure, which could have helped in reducing the risk of stroke. Plus, a 2016 report that combined the same dataset and then also factored in another study as well, found no significantly higher risk of stroke mortality in vegetarians or vegans compared with meat eaters. One large review of studies into strokes discovered that those who had more than 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day were associated with a 26% lower than average risk of suffering a stroke. A reason for this could be to do with antioxidants, compounds that can prevent the cells in our bodies from being damaged, which have been linked with lower stroke risk. Fruits and vegetables are among the best sources of antioxidants. In fact, on average, plants have 64 times more antioxidants than animal foods. Wow. A study of Swedish women showed that those who ate the most antioxidant-rich foods were associated with the lowest risk of stroke. Unfortunately, according to the CDC, only 1 in 10 US citizens gets even 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day, let alone more than 5. Dementia. The number of people living with dementia is increasing, and as life expectancy goes up and we live longer lives, it is predicted to become even more common in the future. Alzheimer's disease is a progressive illness that causes memory loss, unstable moods, paranoia, confusion, and death, and is the most prevalent form of dementia. While there is no proven way to reverse it, there are some preventative measures that can reduce the risk. According to the Alzheimer's Association, they include regular exercise, not smoking, limited alcohol intake, cognitively stimulating activities, and a healthy diet. In a study of 6,000 Americans with an average age of 68, those eating a Mediterranean diet, meaning a diet that includes fish, but also more vegetables, whole grains, beans, seeds, nuts, and fruit, and little red meat and dairy, were associated with a third lower risk of dementia. The lead author of the study stated, eating a healthy plant-based diet is associated with better cognitive function, and around 30% to 35% lower risk of cognitive impairment during aging. In 2020, a large review study found that cholesterol is a risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. This matches up with other studies that found that better heart health in midlife is associated with a lower risk of dementia. Studies have also found that the brains of patients suffering from Alzheimer's disease have significant oxidative damage. So eating antioxidant-rich plant foods could play a role in Alzheimer's disease prevention. This was shown in one study that discovered that those participants who consumed the highest amount of plant-based flavonoids, a type of nutrient rich in antioxidants, were associated with a 40% lower risk of developing dementia when compared to those with the lowest intake. The 2014 Dietary and Lifestyle Guidelines for the Prevention of Alzheimer's, which were developed as part of the International Conference on Nutrition and the Brain, also recommended that vegetables, legumes, beans, peas, and lentils, fruits, and whole grains should replace meats and dairy products as primary staples of the diet. One sec. We've only got a few pages left. Diabetes. There are 2 main types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. 90% of sufferers have type 2 diabetes when the body becomes insulin resistant. This is primarily related to lifestyle choices, particularly diet. Insulin is what normally allows blood sugar to enter muscle cells, where it can be stored and used for energy. But when fat builds up inside muscle and liver cells, the insulin signaling process is blocked, causing cells to reject the insulin. This leaves glucose stuck in the bloodstream, causing very high blood sugar levels, which in turn leads to the pancreas creating more insulin that the body can't process. Excess fat also leads to the death of beta cells, which are what produce insulin in the pancreas. The body stops producing beta cells around the time we turn 20, which means that our ability to produce insulin decreases as these cells die, hence why type 2 diabetics can often need insulin injections. Because insulin resistance causes blood sugar to spike, people often think that limiting carbohydrates which provide the body with glucose, is the best way to treat type 2 diabetes. The problem with this approach is that it attempts to deal with a symptom of the problem, not the problem itself. While eliminating refined carbohydrates such as pastries and donuts is important, these foods are also high in saturated and trans fats and refined sugars, which are just as damaging. Complex carbohydrates such as whole grains, beans, vegetables, fruits, and pulses also create glucose in the body, but they don't have the same negative effects as refined carbohydrates. Quite the opposite, in fact, as they are filled with fiber, antioxidants, and other nutrients. Also, eating whole plant foods means swapping saturated fat for monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which have been shown to improve insulin resistance and insulin secretion. One major study found that those who ate a predominantly plant-based diet had a 23% lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Another study found that those on a plant-based diet were associated with a 78% lower risk of type 2 diabetes compared with those who ate meat on a daily basis. They were also associated with a 27% lower risk than pescatarians, suggesting that to maximize the potential of diet, we need to do more than just swap saturated fat for unsaturated fat. We also need to move to a diet of whole plant foods. As well as preventing type 2 diabetes, a plant-based diet can also help to reduce the impact of diabetes in people who already have it. In a groundbreaking study in Slovakia, 1,000 type 2 diabetics were placed on the Natural Food Interaction Protocol, NFI, an entirely plant-based diet. After 22 weeks, 84% came off their medication because the disease had gone into remission. The study was authorized by the leading diabetes doctors and researchers in Slovakia, and has been so influential that one of the major medical insurance companies in the country is now using the NFI protocol as a treatment for type 2 diabetes. Look, I don't know much about nutrition and health. My friend who has a doctorate in, I think, physiotherapy said that this particular study and institute are pretty problematic. So I would not take that as like medical dietary advice. I feel obligated to say that. Cancer. In 2015, the WHO, International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, released the findings of an analysis of more than 800 different studies on cancer in humans. They declared that processed meat is a Class 1 carcinogen, and that red meat is a Class 2A carcinogen, Class 1 being carcinogenic to humans, and 2A probably being carcinogenic to humans. While the conclusions were primarily based on the evidence of colorectal cancer, also referred to as bowel cancer, processed meat consumption was also associated with a higher risk of stomach cancer, and red meat with a higher risk of pancreatic and prostate cancer. Researchers believe that the processing of red meat is one aspect of the problem, as smoking or curing, which involves adding nitrates, can potentially lead to formation of cancer-causing chemicals. Heme iron was also cited as an increasing risk factor, as was the formation of cancer-causing chemicals that can be produced when meats are cooked at high temperatures, such as pan frying, grilling, and barbecuing. In response to the research, a member of the Meat Advisory Board stated, "What we do know is that avoiding red meat in the diet is not a protective strategy against cancer." They didn't, however, provide an analysis of more than 800 studies, including laboratory studies, to support that claim. Colorectal cancer is the fourth leading cause of cancer-related deaths globally, with the number of deaths from the disease predicted to rise by 60% by 2030. Increasing rates of colorectal cancer corresponded with a nation becoming more affluent and westernized, suggesting that the lifestyle changes that accompany this transition are at least partly responsible. One of the reasons suspected for this is the increased consumption of inflammatory diets. Pro-inflammatory foods include processed meat, red meat, organ meat, refined grains, and sugary drinks. A study of more than 121,000 people showed that even when adjusted for variables such as physical activity, men who ate the most inflammatory diets had a 44% higher risk of developing colorectal cancer when compared to those eating the most anti-inflammatory diets. Women who ate the most inflammatory diets had a 22% higher risk. Part of the problem could be that those consuming the most inflammatory diets also reported lower intakes of dietary fiber, dietary calcium, and whole grains. High levels of insulin, like growth factor 1, IGF-1, have also been linked to an increased risk of cancer. IGF-1 is a growth hormone that is produced by the liver and helps us to grow new tissue. However, when we have too much IGF-1, it can promote the growth and development of cancer. Eating animal products, including dairy, chicken, and fish, increases the amount of IGF-1 in the body, while vegans have been shown to not only have reduced levels of IGF-1, but to have higher levels of IGF-1 binding proteins, which are released by the liver to remove any excess IGF-1. The most comprehensive analysis that has been conducted exploring the relationship between IGF-1 and prostate cancer revealed that men who had the highest IGF-1 concentrations had a 29% higher risk of prostate cancer compared to those with the lowest concentrations. And men with the highest IGF-1 binding proteins had a 19% lower risk of prostate cancer compared to those who had the lowest. In the single largest study carried out investigating IGF-1 and breast cancer, the researchers found that those with the highest IGF-1 levels had a 37% higher risk of breast cancer. Soy intake has also been associated with lower risk of cancer, with a study showing that women with the highest dietary soy intake were associated with a 12% lower risk of breast cancer compared to those with the lowest intake. For men, soy intake has been associated with a 29% lower risk of prostate cancer. And on the point of soy, there is a pervasive belief that soy intake has a feminizing effect on men due to it containing phytoestrogens. However, phytoestrogens are plant hormones and don't have the same effect as estrogen in the body. An analysis of 41 studies showed that intake of plant foods does not affect testosterone levels in men. And a narrative review of clinical evidence also showed that soy intake does not affect estrogen levels in men, even at intake levels considerably higher than are typical for Asian males who have been shown to consume the most soy. Empowering ourselves through food. When considering the mountain of evidence showing the dangers of animal consumption and the benefits of a plant-based diet, it's important to note that studies on human populations are far from perfect, as although they can identify correlations, they can't, for the most part, establish causations. This means that they don't definitively prove the associations they are showing. However, they can be used as a basis to establish links between hypotheses that can then be established more strongly with further observational studies, revealing patterns of associations. These associations can then be tested in clinical trials and intervention studies. At this point, however, there is incontrovertible evidence linking the consumption of animal products with many of our leading chronic diseases and killers. While it's really important to note that diet and lifestyle should complement medical treatments and not be used to replace the advice of medical practitioners, it's also empowering to know that we can positively influence our health through our everyday choices. We absolutely should be knowledgeable about where we are getting our nutrients from, and make sure we are confident that we are obtaining everything we need to be healthy. It is beyond doubt that the benefits of a whole foods plant-based diet, when combined with other lifestyle factors such as exercise, have the potential to reduce our risk of developing some of the most debilitating and severe chronic diseases that affect us. The researchers behind the Eat Lancet planetary health diet that I referenced earlier predict that switching to a more plant-based diet, which in Western countries, according to their analysis, would mean around an 80% reduction in red meat, a 6-fold increase of beans and lentil consumption, a 15-fold increase of nuts and seeds consumption, and an increase in the consumption of whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, could save at least 11 million people a year from deaths caused by eating unhealthy foods. Another study, this time by researchers at the University of Oxford, predicted that a global switch to a more plant-based diet could save 8.1 million people from dying prematurely before the age of 75 by 2050. And it's not just about fewer deaths. Switching to veganism has the potential to create a better quality of life, allowing people to reduce their reliance on certain medications and alleviate the symptoms caused by many of these diseases. Kaiser Permanente, one of the largest healthcare providers in the USA, has even told physicians to promote plant-based diets to their patients because it is a low-risk intervention that is cost-effective and can treat multiple chronic illnesses at the same time. And one of the most exciting aspects of a whole foods plant-based diet is that it isn't one diet that can reduce heart disease, another that can reduce diabetes risk, and another that can reduce colorectal cancer risk. It's the same diet. So, although we can't ever eliminate the risk of these chronic diseases, it's at least rewarding to know that the more whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts, seeds, fruits, and vegetables can certainly help. Ultimately, veganism is not just the best way to reduce animal suffering. It can also help stop us from developing many of the most prevalent chronic diseases, meaning we will live longer and healthier lives, which is something we can all surely aspire to. Alright, that was the end of chapter 6, so I'm going to go into the voice channel for the discussion. I'll just give them a second to join. They might be doing the dishes or something. So, I don't know pretty much anything about nutrition or health. I have pretty much nothing to say. My friend who is a doctorate physiotherapist said that that particular institute and that study were not reliable. But that's it. That's all I really have to say about it. I think it was a good chapter. I liked reading it. It actually, when I read it the first time, it made me want to make my diet more healthier. It made me want to go more whole foods, eat the rainbow, put lemon juice on stuff, all that kind of thing. Yeah. I didn't know that plant-based diet was associated with lower risk of dementia. I definitely want my brain to work at for as long as possible. So yeah. Yeah, I really have nothing to say on this chapter. So I think I'll end it now.